"Your cucumber's too small." That's the first thing she said to me. Straight out, just like that, no warning. Let me tell you, I'd rather she slapped me across the face. At least that would have made sense. But no, this was the reason she gave for what she did. I'll get to that, but first let me introduce myself. My name's Brandon. I'm 42 years old, father of none, husband of one, well, soon to be 0 if you catch my drift. For the last 20 years, I've been working my ass off building a business that took me from eating ramen every night to dining at steakhouses where the check would make most people choke. A software startup is my baby. I'm not going to bore you with all the geeky details, but let's just say I made something people couldn't live without, and they paid me more than they pay their own damn therapists to use it. Now, all this hard work came with sacrifices. Time, sleep, hairline, you name it. But you do what you've got to do, right? For a long while, I thought my marriage was something I could rely on, the one part of my life that was set in stone, as solid as the granite countertops in the dream house I paid for. Keyword, thought. I met Verona when we were young and dumb, back before money meant anything and love was supposed to mean everything. She was beautiful back then, and she knew it, hell, everyone knew it. Blonde, tall, legs that could make a grown man drop to his knees, and me? I wasn't exactly Brad Pitt, but I had ambition, drive, things that back in the day seemed to matter. We clicked, fell in love, got married, played house like we were supposed to. But let's be real, people change, or maybe they just become more of who they always were. Verona used to be different, or maybe I just fell for an illusion. I won't lie. I loved her fiercely, loved the way she looked at me like I was the king of the world when I landed my first major client. Loved how she'd play with her hair whenever I talked about my dreams. But somewhere down the line, that look faded, and I ignored the hell out of it because it was easier that way. Here's where the story gets interesting. See, when my company blew up and started bringing in more cash than we knew what to do with, Verona decided she didn't need to work anymore. I supported it at first. After all, my income was enough for the both of us. Hell, for 3 lifetimes she could pursue whatever she wanted, find herself, all that good stuff. But what did she choose? Herself, and only herself. She became, for lack of a better word, high maintenance. I'm talking salon appointments that took up the whole day, spa treatments that sounded more like science experiments, and enough shopping bags to supply the cast of Real Housewives for a season. She quit her job the moment my checks got bigger, and suddenly her career was being beautiful. "Keeping myself curvy is a full-time job," she'd say, looking at me like I was the fool who didn't understand how much work it took to sit around and look good. And I'll admit it, I bought into it for a while. I thought that was just the price you paid for having a gorgeous wife. You want a sports car, you got to pay for the premium gas, right? But as the years went by, I realized I wasn't living with a partner. I was living with a pet. A pet that required expensive upkeep. The only difference was, a pet brings joy, and Verona, well, she brought something, but it wasn't joy. More like a bill and an attitude to match. Don't get me wrong, she wasn't always cruel or mean, just indifferent. And that's worse, isn't it? I was a goddamn ATM, and she swiped me whenever she wanted. You know how some people say, "I never saw it coming." Well, I guess that's sort of true for me. But in hindsight, the signs were all there. I just ignored them. And then came that conversation, the one where she brought up my cucumber. I remember it vividly. It was a Thursday night. I had just gotten back from a week-long business trip, exhausted but happy to be home, looking forward to unwinding with a beer and my wife. She was sitting in the living room, looking like she had just walked off a magazine cover, wearing this silky robe that probably cost more than the car I drove in college. I thought it was going to be one of those nights, you know, the rare kind where we'd actually connect, where I'd feel like a husband again instead of a walking credit card. "Bran, we need to talk," she said, her voice cool as ice. That's never a good way to start a conversation. My heart sank, but I played it off jokingly, saying, "Sure, as long as it doesn't involve redecorating the bathroom again." "No, seriously," she insisted, staring right through me with those eyes that used to make me feel invincible, but now made me feel about 2 inches tall. "I've been thinking about something for a while, and I want to be honest with you." I was bracing for anything. Maybe she racked up another bill on some overpriced handbag. Maybe she wanted to take another trip to Cabo with her friends, the usual stuff. But then she hit me with it. I think you should consider, you know, enhancing your cucumber. It was like someone ripped the floor out from under me. I just stared at her, my brain struggling to catch up with my ears. I tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe she was joking, but the look on her face was dead serious. I mean, I've done some research, she continued, as if she was discussing the weather. There are places that can, help you with that. Help me with what? I finally managed to stammer, my voice barely above a whisper. We've been together for 15 years, Verona. This was never an issue. She shrugged, so casual, so dismissive. It's just that, well, I think it could make things better for both of us. I'm just being honest, better for both of us. Right? Like I was the one with the problem. I can't explain how that feels, to have the woman you thought you knew suggest that you, the guy who's been keeping her cushy lifestyle afloat for years, need to change something so intimate. And for what? Who gave her the idea that this was necessary? Was she comparing me to someone else? I told her I'd think about it, but my mind was already spinning. The anger was instant and volcanic, but I buried it because that's what we men do. Right? Suck it up, be logical, don't make a scene. But that night was the beginning of the end. I knew then that something had changed, or maybe just maybe, something had always been there, hiding in plain sight. Verona had crossed a line, and I was ready to find out just how deep that rabbit hole went. But trust me, when I did, there would be hell to pay. I know what you're thinking after that conversation. I probably lost my mind. Right away, I started following Verona around like a jealous boyfriend, checking her phone when she wasn't looking, going through her stuff like some insecure creep. Well, here's the thing. I'm not that guy, never was, never will be. The way I see it, if you have to resort to snooping, then the relationship's already 6 feet under. So no, I didn't stay up late stewing over every word she said, trying to pick apart her every move. I'm a man who knows how to compartmentalize. Years of running a business will do that to you. You learn how to handle problems, how to push them into a corner of your mind and keep moving forward. And I had too much on my plate to sit around wondering if my wife was staring at a bigger cucumber somewhere. But I'm not stupid, either. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling while she slept like a baby, her perfect, pampered self, with no damn care in the world, I made a decision. If she thought there was something wrong with me, something to be fixed, then I needed to know what else was going on. And there was only one way to do that without letting on that I suspected a thing. The next day, I made a phone call, one phone call, to be precise, to an old friend of mine, Kurt. The guy and I go way back to college, actually. He was always the type to see things differently, like he was born to live in the shadows. So naturally, he went on to open his own detective agency, Shadow Works Investigations. Cheesy name? Sure. But the guy was damn good at his job. Kurt, buddy, I need a favor, I said. That's all it took, a few words, a quick catch-up, and he was on board. I didn't need to spell it out for him, either. I could hear the recognition in his voice as soon as I mentioned Verona. Brandon, are you telling me you want your own wife followed? Yeah, I replied, feeling that knot in my gut start. Tighten. I want to know where she goes, who she sees, all of it. And that was it. Once you give the go-ahead to a guy like Kurt, things start moving fast. He had a couple of his best guys on Verona within hours. Guys who knew how to blend in, how to follow someone so close they could see what brand of gum they were chewing without ever getting noticed. Meanwhile, I went back to my life, or at least I tried to. Business deals, late nights at the office, the usual grind that kept me too busy to think about what might be happening behind the scenes. I didn't obsess over it. Hell, I didn't even want to think about it. Denial is a powerful thing, and so is distraction. And when I was done distracting myself, I'd pour a drink, maybe 2, maybe 3. Who's counting? I told myself it was just to take the edge off, to relax after a long day. And look, I'm not the kind of guy to get sloppy drunk, but a few extra fingers of whiskey don't hurt anyone, right? At least, that's what I told myself as I downed another glass. Every few days, Kay would call me with an update, and every time it was the same damn thing. Nothing yet, Bran. She went to the salon, did some shopping, had lunch with friends. No red flags, man. If she's stepping out, she's damn good at hiding it. And for a while, I started to believe it. I started to think maybe I'd overreacted. That maybe Verona's comment about my cucumber was just some misguided attempt to spice things up, to bring us closer together. Hell, if I knew. But at some point, I was almost ready to tell Kurt to call the whole thing off, save myself the money, save my sanity, and chalk it up to a weird blip in our marriage. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Wednesday, a day like any other. I was in the middle of a meeting with a new client, pitching some $500,000 deal, when my phone buzzed. Normally, I'd ignore it, keep my focus where it needed to be, but something told me to pick it up. And the second I saw Kurt's name flash across the screen, I knew this wasn't just another routine update. "Bran, we need to talk," he said. His voice was tense, too tense for a guy who was usually as cool as a corpse. "Can you talk now?" "Not really," I replied, glancing at the client across the table who was droning on about budget projections. "What's going on?" "Verona is not exactly where she said she'd be today," he said carefully, like he was tiptoeing around the words. "She told you she was meeting her friend Candace for lunch, right?" "Yes," I said, my voice already wavering. I knew where this was going, but I wasn't ready to hear it. She wasn't with Candace. She met up with a guy, and instead, not just any guy either. Let's just say it didn't look like a business meeting. They were at a hotel, and there it was, that one word, hotel. It was like a bullet straight to my chest. In that moment, everything went red, and my heart started pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my rib cage. "Are you sure?" was all I could muster, my voice coming out like a choked whisper. "Yeah, Bran, I'm sure. Got pictures, got video. You know I wouldn't call you with this if I didn't have proof." Proof. Pictures, video, evidence that my wife, the woman I'd spent 15 years of my life with, was with another man. And not just with him, screwing him, probably right now, as I sat there surrounded by strangers who had no idea that my whole world was crumbling apart in real time. I don't remember much of what happened after that. I think I wrapped up the meeting, or at least excused myself. I think I told Kurt to send everything to me, to lay it all out, so I could see every gory detail. And then I sat there alone in my office, staring at my hands as they trembled with a rage I'd never felt before. The worst part was the silence. No sound, no movement, just me and my thoughts. The realization that this wasn't just a blip, this wasn't just a stupid comment about my cucumber. This was a betrayal, a full-on stab in the back, that had probably been happening right under my nose while I played the clueless, dutiful husband. But I wasn't clueless anymore. I knew what was happening, and I knew what I had to do. This wasn't going to end well, not for Verona, not for her little side piece. Because the thing about me is, I don't let things slide. Never have, never will. In revenge, let's just say I was already planning it before the call even ended. After I hung up the phone with Kurt that day, it was like a switch flipped inside me. There's a moment in every man's life where he has to decide, fight or fold. I wasn't about to let Verona walk all over me and stroll off into the sunset with her gym buff boy toy. No, I was going to take my life back, and I'd make sure she paid for every damn lie, every betrayal, every single time she smiled in my face while screwing someone else behind my back. The next morning, I called my lawyers. I'd worked with them for years. They knew how I operated. "I need you to prepare everything," I told them. "We're going to make sure that when this divorce happens, Verona walks away with nothing, and I mean nothing." They didn't need convincing. Hell, they were practically salivating at the thought. One thing about my legal team, they're as ruthless as they come. When they go in for the kill, they don't stop until there's nothing left. And so the gears were in motion. Financial assets, properties, bank accounts, all that stuff most people think is untouchable when they're living their cushy lives. Well, I was about to touch all of it. Every dollar, every piece of jewelry, every high-end shoe Verona thought she could parade around in. When the time was right, she'd be left with nothing but the clothes on her back. And trust me, that's the best-case scenario for her. But while all that legal work was going on, I couldn't help but think about him, the other guy, the one who was banging my wife. Thanks to Kurt and his team, I had all the information I needed, and let's just say this wasn't some random hookup Verona found on the internet. His name was Evan, the classic tall, dark, and handsome type, the kind of guy who's all muscles, tattoos, and a cocky smile that probably works wonders on desperate housewives. A fitness trainer, of course he was. I mean, this guy fit the stereotype to a T, and the cherry on top was that he was married and had a kid too. A little girl about 5 or 6. At first, I couldn't believe it. This douchebag wasn't just screwing around on his wife. He was doing it while pretending to be some sort of wholesome family man. And it made me sick, not just because of what he was doing to his own family, but because of what he represented. The same betrayal, the same lie, just in a different package. So yeah, I could have just let it slide, could have just focused on Verona and let Evan deal with his own karma. But that's not how I work. You don't get to touch what's mine and walk away unscathed. And I had just the guys to handle this. I gave Kurt another call and told him to have his boys arrange a little meeting with Evan. I didn't need it to be anything too intense. No one needed to end up in a hospital bed. But I wanted Evan to know exactly who he was dealing with. So they waited, watched him, found the perfect time to make their move late one night, after he was done training some client alone. Walking to his car, it was dark enough to hide in the shadows, and my boys are good at blending in, until the moment they need to make an impression. When they cornered him, Evan didn't know what hit him. He probably thought it was some random mugging at first, or maybe a bunch of drunks looking for trouble. But it wasn't until they shoved a phone in his face and asked, "Do you know the woman you've been banging has a husband?" that the reality set in. "Well, what are you talking about?" he stammered, the panic spreading across his face as he started putting 2 and 2 together. The swagger disappeared real quick, replaced by fear. And fear smells sweet when it's coming from a man who thought he was untouchable. "Verona," one of my guys said. "Ring a bell? Married to Brandon. You've been real busy with her, haven't you?" Evan's face turned pale, and he started stumbling over his words, trying to come up with excuses. But it was all nonsense, just a bunch of, "I didn't know," "It was a mistake," and other lies that no one was buying. And then came the consequences. I told the guys not to go overboard, but enough to make sure he'd remember this night. Remember the name Brandon every time he looked at himself in the mirror and saw the reminder of his little mistake. Let's just say when they were done, Evan had some psychological discomfort that would take a while to shake off. But that wasn't the end of his suffering. Like I said, he had a family, and that meant his sins had consequences beyond just him. A couple of days later, my guys went to Evan's house. A cozy little suburban place with a white picket fence. Picture perfect. When his wife answered the door, a sweet, tired-looking woman holding their little girl in her arms. They didn't have to say a word. They just handed her an envelope full of photos, videos, proof of Evan's after-hours workouts with my wife. I wish I could say I felt nothing, that I was numb to all of it. But when they told me how her eyes filled with tears as she flipped through every incriminating photo, I did feel a little bit sorry for her. She didn't deserve this. Neither did their daughter. But at the same time, she deserved to know who she was married to see Evan for the scumbag he really was. A liar, a cheat, a man who tore apart 2 families because he couldn't keep it in his pants. And now Verona had to pay the price too. Evan wasn't getting away with it, but neither was she. Because my revenge wasn't just about hurting the other man. It was about tearing down the entire castle of lies Verona had built around herself. Brick by brick, until all that was left was rubble. And believe me, there was more to come. I was just getting started. The game was on, and I was going to win. Once my lawyers told me they were locked and loaded, that's when I knew it was time to take the gloves off. I wasn't interested in a clean break. I wanted her world to shatter, to come crashing down so hard she'd have no choice but to choke on the mess she made. It was time for Verona to feel what it meant to lose everything. So the first thing I did, I shut off her life source, the money. All of it. Every card, every account, every penny that flowed so freely into her perfect little hands. All dried up in an instant. I called my bank and told them to freeze everything in her name, cut off every single access point she had. I wish I could have been there to see her face when she found out. I imagined she was doing her usual routine, picking up a new wardrobe at one of those high-end boutiques. Her arms were draped in bags of overpriced crap she didn't need. Then she hit the register, swiped the card like she'd done 1,000 times before, and nothing, declined. Can you picture it? The confusion on her face, the look she gave the cashier when they told her to try again, and again, until she realized that nothing was working. My God, I would have paid money to see that moment, that sweet realization that her endless shopping spree was officially over. Of course, that's not all I did when I cut her off financially. I cut her off from everything else too. I blocked her number on my phone, so she couldn't get through, even if she tried. And trust me, I knew she'd try. That woman could talk a dog off a meat truck if she thought it would benefit her. So, I made sure she had no way of sweet-talking me back into her web of lies. But I didn't stop there. I put security outside our house, the house she so loved to show off, the one she thought she'd grow old in. I found 2 of the meanest, coldest guys I could and told them to keep watch 24/7. If she tried to come in, they were to stop her at the gate and hand over her things, all nicely packed up in black trash bags. I didn't want her soiling my front door ever again. And her trying to get to me at work? Not a chance. I went straight to my office manager and told her, from now on, Verona is persona non grata. She's not to come in, not to be let through, and under no circumstances is anyone to pass along a message from her. She doesn't exist as far as this place is concerned. I'm sure Verona thought she'd be able to charm her way into the building if she just showed up, played the distraught wife, put on those crocodile tears, acted like she was in the right. But no one was buying what she was selling anymore, and it was poetic. In that one move, I took away her safety net, her ability to run back to me and beg for another chance, or for more money, or whatever flimsy excuse she would have come up with. She was on her own, and that was just how I wanted it. But it gets better. See, cutting her off financially and keeping her out of my life was just the start. What I really wanted was to destroy her reputation, to make sure that everyone she knew, friends, family, strangers, the whole damn world, saw her for what she really was. And that's where my good friend Kurt came in again. Kurt had a guy, let's call him a tech specialist, a hacker, essentially, but not some low-life basement dweller who cracks into emails for fun. This guy was a professional, someone who knew how to make things disappear and appear. So, I gave him the order, plain and simple. Get into Verona's social media accounts. All of them. Facebook, Instagram, you name it. And once he was in, I told him to start posting. It started with the pictures, every sleazy, degrading image and video that Kurt's detectives had gotten of Verona and Evan in their hotel escapades. Uploaded from her own accounts for all to see. Date nights, hotel hookups, anything that would leave no question in anyone's mind what she'd been doing behind my back. But that wasn't all. I had the guy write up captions like, providing intimate services, DM for rates. Like she was selling herself to the highest bidder. And once those posts hit the internet, they spread like wildfire. Her phone must have blown up with calls and messages. Friends wondering what the hell was going on. Her parents probably having heart attacks. Her so-called social circle disowning her faster than you can say, cheater. And the best part? There was no way for her to deny it. These weren't some anonymous revenge posts from me. They came from her own damn account. Verona's fingerprints were all over it, and she couldn't do a thing to stop it. She must have been losing her mind, her entire world, all her carefully curated image of being this beautiful, perfect wife, shattered in a matter of hours. And while I'll admit there was a moment, a very fleeting one, where I thought about how cruel it all was, about how it would destroy her, that moment passed because it had to be done. But all of this, the block cards, the public shaming, the guards at the house, all that was just the opening act. The real show was yet to come. Because after all was said and done, after her name was dragged through the mud and every secret was laid bare, there was still one more hurdle for her to face. The trial. And I was going to make damn sure it was a spectacle. A battle where there'd be no mercy and no second chances. Verona thought she could get away with it all. Live her little fairy tale life and screw around like the rules didn't apply to her. But she forgot one thing. I don't lose, not in business, not in life, and sure as hell not to someone who tried to destroy me from the inside out. And as the storm started to build, I could only imagine what her next move would be, because whatever it was, it wouldn't matter. The pieces were already in play, and there was no turning back. The court date came sooner than I expected, and when I say it went quickly, I mean it was over in a flash, like ripping off a Band-Aid. Except this Band-Aid had been festering for years. Verona thought she had a chance. She probably convinced herself that the judge would take pity on her or that she could sweet-talk her way into some kind of settlement. But the evidence, the testimonies, the entire mountain of proof against her was so ironclad that her lawyer might as well have thrown in the towel before we even started. She never stood a chance. And to be honest, I couldn't even be bothered to show up to every single hearing. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to hear her voice. That same voice that once told me she loved me, but now just sounded like the shrieking of a vulture circling a carcass. I stayed out of her way, kept my distance because seeing her would only make me angrier, and I didn't need the distraction. The law was on my side. My lawyers tore her to shreds, and each day brought her closer to leaving the courtroom with nothing but the clothes on her back. But there was this one day, one hearing, when she managed to catch me alone. The judge had just wrapped things up, and I was heading out, feeling like I could finally breathe. Verona must have been waiting for me, lying in wait like a spider, hoping for one last desperate chance to spin a web around me. And the second she saw me, she pounced. "Brandon, please," she called out, rushing over to me like we were still a couple, like she could just waltz back into my life and erase all the damage. She grabbed my arm. Her face was red, her eyes puffy from crying. "Please just hear me out. I'm sorry. I made a mistake." "A mistake?" I spat, yanking my arm away. "Is that what you call sleeping with another guy for months? A mistake?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face, and she got louder, not caring who was watching us in the hallway. I didn't know what I was doing. I was confused. I was lonely. I cut her off. "You were screwing around with a married guy and telling me I needed to fix my damn cucumber. That's not confusion, that's calculated. You knew exactly what you were doing by then." She was breaking down, her face a mess of mascara and regret. She dropped to her knees in the middle of the courthouse like we were in some bad soap opera. "Please, Brandon, please don't do this. I can't live like this. I can't live without you. I'll do anything, I swear. I'll make it right." I didn't even blink. The Verona I loved was gone. If she'd ever existed in the first place, what was kneeling in front of me was a hollow shell, a stranger who looked like my wife, but who meant absolutely nothing to me now. And I knew that this wasn't about love or regret or whatever sob story she was spewing. This was about money, about power, about saving face. "You're a bastard, Brandon," she screamed, her voice echoing through the hallway. A cold-hearted, selfish brute. When I reached the door, I finally turned around, locked eyes with her one last time, and held up my middle finger high and proud. Then, I walked out, leaving her standing there, surrounded by her own mess, alone in every sense of the word. The door closed behind me with a slam, and for the first time in what felt like years, I felt free. The trial was over, but my life was just getting started. After the dust settled and Verona was officially out of my life, I did what any man who just clawed his way out of a toxic marriage would do. I started living, really living. No more dragging around dead weight. No more feeling like my own house was a prison. I was a free man and the world felt wide open. The first thing I did was hire some top talent to replace me at work. Why spend my days buried in contracts and spreadsheets when I could be out in the world, actually enjoying the fruits of my labor? So, I promoted some of my best guys to take over the day-to-day stuff and essentially let the company run itself. Yeah, I still kept my finger on the pulse. After all, it's my baby. But I handed off enough of the responsibility that I could finally do something I put off for years. I started traveling. I packed my bags and hit the road. Beaches in the Caribbean, vineyards in Tuscany, nights spent under the neon lights of Tokyo, and mornings waking up to ocean views in Bali. I'd find myself in some bar on a rooftop overlooking the city skyline, with a glass of scotch in one hand and a stunning woman on the other. And this time, it wasn't about filling a void. It was about rediscovering what it felt like to actually enjoy my life, to laugh, to dance, to not give a damn for once. Every experience, every adventure felt like a step further away from the hell Verona put me through, and closer to the life I was always meant to have. And while my life was going up, hers was going straight to rock bottom. I'd hear things now and then because, let's face it, word travels fast when you fall from grace. Verona, once the queen of social circles, was now practically a pariah. Most of her friends cut her off, whether because they didn't want to be associated with the scandal or because they realized she was just toxic. All those rich girl habits she picked up during our marriage? Yeah, those didn't go away. The problem was, the cash flow did. And she tried to find a way out of her mess. Of course she did. I heard she was trying to hook up with a businessman I knew. A guy who ran in the same circles as me. A wealthy real estate investor. The kind Verona would have drooled over back when we were together. But you know how these things go. People talk. He knew the whole story about Verona's affair, her drama, the whole mess. And when she came around batting her eyelashes and trying to play the same game she played with me, he didn't hesitate to shut her down. Get lost, he told her. You're bad news, and I don't need your kind of trouble. Brutal, but I guess she got the message loud and clear. No one wanted to deal with a woman who had scandal written all over her forehead. As for Evan, her oh-so-handsome fitness trainer, well, he didn't fare much better. His wife, bless her soul, wasted no time in throwing his ass out the door the second my guys handed her the evidence. I think he was expecting her to cry and beg, to ask for an explanation, but she didn't give him the satisfaction. Divorce papers right away, and he was left standing there like the idiot he was, wondering what went wrong. And because I wasn't quite done with him yet, I made sure to leave a parting gift. See, a guy like Evan relies on reputation. Being a fitness trainer is all about trust, about clients feeling comfortable, safe, taken care of. So, I made a couple of phone calls, one to the owner of the gym he worked at, a couple more to the bigger clients who were paying his bills, just told them the truth. Told them the kind of guy Evan really was, how he preyed on married women, how he tore apart his own family. And in this business, image is everything. He didn't stand a chance. By the time the week was over, he was fired, out of work, out of a marriage, and probably out of hope. Now, some of you might think I went too far. Maybe you're thinking, Brandon, why go to all that trouble? Why not just walk away and let karma do its thing? And sure, maybe that's what a better man would have done. But I'm not a saint. I wasn't just going to let these people screw me over and walk away like nothing happened. They wanted to play dirty, so I was going to show them how deep the mud could really get. And now here I am, sitting on a beach with a cold drink in my hand, staring out at the ocean and feeling like, for the first time in a long time, my life is actually mine. No dead weight dragging me down. No secrets, no lies, just me, my freedom, and the whole world to explore. I guess I have Verona to thank for that in some twisted way. If she hadn't blown everything up, I'd probably still be trapped in a miserable marriage, pretending like everything was fine. So let me ask you, what would you have done in my place? If someone ripped your life apart and stomped all over your heart, would you let them go quietly, or would you make sure they paid the price like I did?